There's a cat, though.
Oh, is there a cat? Hello, cat. That is Cement. Now you have met Cement.
Hello, hello.
Cement is getting away.
So, good luck to have a cat aboard a ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine keeping pests?
Yeah, keep the
under
rats
control?
away.
Yeah, she would love that. She keeps our balcony free from bugs.
Okay.
that's very good.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Because Language, a show about linguistics and science of language. I'm Daniel Midgley, and with me now, someone who is well known as a bit of a loose cannon. It's Hedvig Hurgård.
Am I well known to be a loose cannon?
Well, no, not really, but I was looking through the list of idioms and that one popped out, so I thought I would just get your reaction. Spontaneous.
Okay. All right.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
I think Ben is the loose cannon, and he's unfortunately not here today.
He's not. He's feeling a bit under the weather. Mm-hmm. Yep. He was, all week long, he was taking a pile of school children to a camp, which is just, I think he deserves a medal for bravery there, but he's not feeling too well, so he couldn't join us today, but he will be here, I'm sure, on a future episode.
Yes.
So here to help us out is a very special co-host. It's Chase Dalton of the US Naval History Podcast. Hey, Chase, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Daniel. Hey, Hedvig. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
I'm all right. Can I ask a question on behalf of our listeners of Chase?
Absolutely.
Are you a historian, a military man, or both?
I am a very poor historian and a former military man.
Okay.
Good.
Yes, I went to the Naval Academy many years ago, and then I served in the Navy for 6 years. And during my time in the Navy, I read a lot of naval history books and slowly, started regaling some of the sailors that I worked with some naval history, factoids, and that developed into a passion, which I eventually, on my second deployment, started writing these down in a coherent fashion, and that became the first couple episodes of the US Naval History Podcast. And after I got out, it became a COVID project when I was locked away, nothing better to do, and produced the first couple, and turns out some people liked it.
There are a bunch, but I found that yours is very entertaining and well-researched. So,
Thank you. Yeah, it's not a deep dive into the specific battles and events, but more of just an era-by-era overview that I try to my best to connect, keep it entertaining, but also tie it to the modern era and some larger themes of history. And we're almost at the modern day, and sort of broaching into the modern day. I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about today's Navy and some of the challenges the force is facing, and specifically in Asia and the Pacific with the rise of the somewhat clunkily named People's Liberation Army Navy, aka China's Navy.
They like doing that with the names.
Yeah, I wonder if it makes more sense in Chinese.
Possibly.
I think it does, and it is the army that won the Civil War, so.
True. And it was the Navy that, or the U.S. Navy, I should say, that stopped them from finishing off the Nationalists just 110 miles across the Taiwan Strait.
We decided we were going to get together and tackle some expressions in English that are nautical, or maybe not, because Chase and I were sort of doing some groundwork for this episode, and there's this idea of canoe, the committee to ascribe a nautical origin to everything.
What?
Many expressions are thought to be nautical, but in fact are not nautical.
In fact, so bad that I was going through some of the books that I'd read, just general naval history, and often they'll have a little anecdote section about, and this phrase comes from a nautical origin, and I sort of remembered where they were, and I went and found them again in my large bookshelf of naval history, and it turns out that several of them are wrong, and the authors have been incorrectly educating their audiences for many years.
Well, what is reality? I, dear listener, in this episode, I'm going to take the stance of the slightly communist, postmodern European, which I am hoping is going to provide a good counterpoint to my fellow people on this show. What is reality, really? Isn't it just what we agree on? And if we agree that something, etc., expect this.
I'm ready.
I personally think we're the Sims 37, but hey,
We often say, oh, this appears to be a nautical origin. People say this is a nautical origin, but it's secretly not. And a few weeks ago when I was teaching a class for adults, I told them about this canoe thing, the committee to ascribe a nautical origin to everything, and how it's usually not nautical. And over the course of that lecture, I like to look up stuff. Like somebody will say, what about this word or this phrase? And I will look it up, and I'll have maybe the Oxford English Dictionary or some other websites on the screen behind me. And so help me, 4 or 5 times, it would say chiefly nautical, and just for random words that were coming up. So I think there are some sneaky nautical phrases that we might not expect.
Okay. All right. I'd be willing to accept that. We'll see how the rest goes.
Okay.
We'll see if I've heard of some of these sneaky ones or not.
Okay. Now, this episode is a special bonus patron edition for us. However, it's going to be a regular episode for the US Naval History Podcast, so that'll be interesting. That'll move some traffic around. For our patrons, we got a special message, a couple of special messages. Our yearly mail out is coming soon. Every patron will be getting a few choice items from us in their actual physical mailbox, not your digital mailbox, your analog mailbox. So please make sure that Patreon has your correct address. Also, we have going now our Word of the Week of the year. We take all the words of the week that are running around from all our episodes this year. We scrape them together. We slap them onto Twitter. We slap them onto Facebook. People can vote by liking them. A few candidates are emerging as favorites, so please go and vote. Hunt us down. We're Because Lang Pod on all the socials. We'll be announcing the results on a live episode to which all patrons are invited. So watch our socials and watch our Discord for that information. You can join us. We're really looking forward to that.
And it's like word of the year that all these dictionaries and other institutions do, but better. Because it's our listeners, and our listeners are the best part of the population.
They're really on top of things.
Do you guys care to pre-tip the scales and declare a inside favorite, or are you going to leave that up to the audience?
We have chatted about it, and Daniel's told me one thing that's winning that I really like, but I think I don't want to bias the vote.
Darn.
I'm hoping that Ussie or Ussie can do well.
Also, that is never going to happen.
Well,
that's why I chose to say that one, because I thought nobody's going to go. Everyone hates that one. So,
everyone hates that one.
I
try to say sometimes for fun.
I would love it if that got bandwagoned.
Oh, no.
Exactly. I will say that for that episode, our Discord friends are going to bring their favorite words, and there have been a few popping up. And it is Word of the Year season. We just love Word of the Year season. It's so much fun. Now, let me ask a question, you two. We're going to try to make some calls as to whether an expression is nautical or is not nautical. But how would we know the difference? Is it just as simple as picking a few good websites, or, making a guess, flinging a dart at a dartboard? How do you know?
Probably earliest recorded usage. If we have if it first appears in a nautical related book or a play or whatever written source we have, and it's specifically ascribed a nautical source, or within maybe a year or two. That's a layperson's guess. But is there a better answer that I'm missing here?
No.
That's in my notes. If you check the original appearances in print, and if it has nothing to do with ships, then there's your answer.
That said, as with all etymology, we often can't go much further back. They're usually about the 1500s for
It's
Germanic languages. If it's Latin or something, then we can go further back. But if it's like English or German or something, usually 1500s is about the knockoff for most major text collections. And lo and behold, people spoke languages before the 1500s. And that word might have shifted from one origin to another by the point it was first recorded, right? So when we say nautical in origin, we mean nautical as early as 1500s probably. But it could be earlier. Hey, maybe all language stems from
the sea.
The sea. Yeah.
Perhaps.
You know?
We just pick up words and use them again. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a few of those.
So how often does it happen, if ever, that, we think we know the origin of a word, and then, someone finds or digitizes a manuscript and somehow it gets picked up and it's like, oh, in fact, we completely misunderstood the origins of the word. And in fact, we had been, ascribing it to a morphed meaning. Does that happen frequently at all anymore?
I don't hear of that frequently, but there are a lot of words. And there's not a news feed alerting all linguists as soon as this happens.
Well, if you follow message boards, like especially the American Dialect Society, they do keep track of antedatings, and they get really excited when a phrase gets antedated. Oh, I found this term, and it's older than we thought, and then that changes, and then that gets added to maybe the Oxford English Dictionary or other places. So antedatings do happen.
But it's like, oh, we found an earlier occurrence of this word, but not like with a different meaning and like a different origin. It's usually just like the same thing we already had, but older, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen very often that we completely flip our understanding of a word or phrase on its head. But
right.
Like you said, Hedvig, words start getting used like a hood. If you look under a hood back in the Middle Ages, you find a monk. And if you look under a hood now, you find an engine. So things do change over time. I will say that you mentioned the 1500s, Hedvig. That is an interesting time for language and in history, because that's kind of when we start seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, Chase, but we see nautical dominance, worldwide shipping going on. Like if it's much later than that, like if a expression starts in the 1800s and people claim it's nautical, is there a time when nautical dominance, nautical things were so much in the public imagination that would have been the time? And if it's later than that, then it's kind of too late to be nautical?
So if I were to hazard a random guess, I would say that while the 1500s is really when ocean-going expeditions became a big thing.
For Europeans.
Right. Well, I mean, the technology largely did not exist, even outside of a European context, for large scale. The Polynesians were certainly doing it. But in terms of
all of the Pacific was settled 3,000 years earlier.
Right,
yep.
Right.
And they kept voyaging.
So I meant that in terms of, large scale trading, right? Ships large enough to do regular, back and forth of.
I think it's volume we're looking for.
A volume. And then
speed or frequency, yeah.
And then that sort of, there's, a lot of historians who would argue that one of the main things that caused the development of the modern, nation state starting in Spain and Portugal and France, as we understand it today, is, ocean-going trade. And then you need to protect this ocean-going trade because it's so valuable. It's making so much money, and you need to have a navy. But a navy is just ungodly expensive, and it's logistically so hard to do. And you need to develop some bureaucracy and some centralization. And then that spurs a state and becomes sort of a virtuous cycle. And, and then England gets in on it, right? And then the dominant and the Dutch and the various powers evolve sort of the modern bureaucratic centralized nation state as, sort of understood in the Western world today because of trade. And that all stems from the very late 14 to mid 1500s. And, Christopher Columbus and the Portuguese, slightly earlier than that, figured out that you can go around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, and reach India. And, it turns out there's a bunch of stuff that, previously had been blocked by or heavily tariffed or inefficiently, extracted through the Ottoman Empire via land, and that this was really profitable. And navies expanded via that process of protecting trade. But I'd be, going back to the origin of words, I wonder if in more romance-focused languages that perhaps many of the origins go back farther to the Roman time, because, the Mediterranean, Mare Nostrum, I think, right? Our lake. The Romans had extensive trade, and the empire could not have been sustained without trade, because the Rome itself would have starved to death 1,000 times over had they not been able to bring grain, en masse from Egypt and, trade throughout the Mediterranean. And they were mostly navigating via coastline, but they were doing some, cross-Mediterranean trade as well. And so I wonder if in some of the Romance languages, a lot of that terminology goes back to the Roman era, because there was a extensive Mediterranean seaborne trade network.
So if I said 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, prime nautical territory, 1800's a little late, or is that wrong?
I mean, I think that if you were to look at a graph of people that did ocean-going voyages and value of trade and volume of trade, it would just be an exponential curve up until today, starting at, call it 1490 or so, 1450.
Okay.
I mean, and just, today, and I don't think that exponential curve breaks anywhere, quite frankly.
Okay, great. Okay, good to know. Okay. That's going to influence my choices here.
We should add to the historical record that when we say trade, right, like we are talking about trade of valuable things like spices and things, but we're also talking about brutal extortion of people and the transportation of slaves.
Yes.
And even when it's not the transportation of slaves, the extortion of people through this trade. My husband's reading a book right now about the British East India Company, and it's interesting times.
For several centuries, there was a unfortunate aspect of trade, and really one that enabled it, because the Europeans, through a combination of policy and disease, wiped out the native population, and you need someone to go produce the trade goods that are being sent back to Europe in convenient source. So just look south, and then that created tens of millions of lives immiserated and over the course of the next 300 odd years or so.
Yeah.
I would like to also, in addition to looking for the first instance of a word or a phrase, there are some reliable websites that I think are especially reliable. Can I just name some, and maybe you can name yours? The Oxford English Dictionary, who sponsors the show, Worldwide Words by Michael Quinion, The Phrase Finder by Gary Martin, wordhistories.net by Pascal Chegre. I think that the Grammarphobia blog with Patricia O'Connor and Stuart Kellerman is quite good. Mental Floss uses different authors. I quite like them. And also A Way with Words with Grant Barrett and Martha Barnett. So those are some sources that I tend to trust. Any more I missed?
Crickets.
Okay, great. We'll put a link to those on our website, becauselanguage.com. Now, we started off by asking our friends on Discord to name some of their favorite maritime expressions. Or are they? Let's get started. Aria Flame starts us off by saying, I mentioned in their wheelhouse, I think, at some point. She wanted to know about wheelhouse. Yay or nay? What is a wheelhouse?
Isn't that for a mill that's attached to a creek?
Can be.
Wouldn't that be a mill? No.
No, because you can have it with wind.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That is one use of wheelhouse that has been used in history. Once again, we talked about how words get used for one thing and then picked up and changed and changed and changed. So that's one usage. When do we see that version of wheelhouse? Just going to check because I didn't save that.
So I know in a nautical sense, a wheelhouse is the pilot house. And you generally would not say, at least on a Navy vessel, go to the wheelhouse. But I would understand what someone meant, because there is a literal wheel. But we would say pilot house, where there's the wheel, but also the helmsman would work, and the boatswain mates and the quartermasters, and essentially where the primary driving location of the ship is, usually up high where there's a good view, because it's hard to beat the Mark I eyeball for a lot of things when navigating over the high seas. But as I understand it, with some preliminary research, that is actually, while it is a very old usage, calling the pilot house a wheelhouse, it is not the original.
It's close. According to Oxford, they collapse those two into one. There's a structure enclosing a large wheel. So it could be a water wheel, could be a steering wheel. 1835 is the first instance, and it is... Oh, wait, no.
1835? That's quite late.
I've got an 1808.
We got to go back. 1808, a building in which cartwheels are stored. That's the wheelhouse. So that's the earliest. But then the water wheel house and the steering wheel house appear to be pretty contemporaneous.
Isn't this just good-fashioned Germanic compounding? The ways that English has lost. All of these people are like, we have a wheel, we have a building where that is. It's a wheelhouse. And all of them maybe independently started using this term because, like, you have a mill by a creek, you have a wheel in the house, you're a wheelhouse. You have a steering wheel in a room. And then the cartwheels seem to be, like, the most, the most wheelie wheel out of those three.
Okay. Yeah, the most prototypical wheel.
Because that's the one that's actually used for transportation, like a wheel, like on a cart. Whereas the steering wheel and the mill one are analogs of that.
Yeah. maybe a bit less so. I notice also that there's a couple more usages of wheelhouse. The wheelhouse in baseball from 1959, the area that you've got to get the ball into when the batter is trying to hit it with a cricket bat. And then...
Oh, the wicket.
Sorry, did I say baseball? What, sports ball? I meant to say sports ball.
Sports ball, there we go.
This is not a sports podcast.
Wicket is my favorite cricket term. It means like 3 or 4 different things.
Does it? Wait, I'm struggling.
Yeah, there's a wicket, the object. There's a wicket when you do a thing. There's a wicket that you're standing on.
In sports ball, that's 3 different things?
In cricket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, I did not know that.
This is just from my poor British husband trying to teach me cricket. And I go, wait, you said that word again. Like, what? Why?
That's got to be something different because ambiguity is standard in language.
Yeah.
Look, cricket is easy. It's just like baseball, except there's 3 bases instead of 4.
And the games or whatever you call them last all day long.
That's right.
And there's cucumber sandwiches, and you can drink and hang out with your mates.
It's great. How fun. The wheelhouse meaning expertise comes from about 1987. The quote is, he told me he couldn't play reggae. Of course he could, but it wasn't his wheelhouse. So are we saying nautical? I think at least a little bit.
And where does that metaphor come from? Which one of the 3?
Right. That seems like a leap to come out of nowhere, right? It's in my wheelhouse. I guess a wheelhouse in the sense of a ship that's where you control the ship from. So perhaps
that is the relevant metaphor. Yes, it's where you control the thing from, and so it goes from place where you control the ship to area of skill or expertise. So I can see that's the connection there.
Okay.
Perhaps not originally nautical, but certainly nautical meaning joined along with other meanings at the time.
Now, I would say that's nautical. If it comes from the steering wheel on a ship, wheelhouse,
yes,
to in my wheelhouse, then that's just straight up nautical origin to me.
Oh, you mean like the water wheelhouse sense sort of diverged because there's no expertise that's intended there?
Well, I was also going to say I wasn't sure that was the case because maybe like what you have in your wheelhouse where you have your cartwheels is where you have the things you use.
I mean, possibly. Oh gosh, this is so tangly already.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me amend that then.
Okay.
The wheelhouse, meaning the steering wheelhouse, was one sense of many for wheelhouse at the time, but it's probably the prevailing sense that gave us this idea of your area of expertise. Does that sound right?
I'd buy that, yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's go to Aristemo, who mentions pipe down, nautical or not. What's the story?
I barely know what it means.
Oh.
Pipe down, you kids.
Yeah, it's like an old man phrase, right? Or at least that's how I associate it.
Beyond, pipe down over there.
Beyond the nautical.
You kids with your rock and roll.
Get off my lawn.
Okay.
So have any of you guys ever heard a bosun's mate's pipe?
You said several words I don't know.
Bosun.
Yeah.
So I'm going to chat that over to you. Let me know if you can hear this.
That was quite piercing.
Right. It is quite annoying, especially when you are being woken up by it. Or in the case of pipe down, it is the signal to... Well, really, it's a signal to pay attention to what's going on the 1MC, right? So the ship-wide announcement circuit. And, if I were running a ship, I don't think I would have that, despite the nautical tradition associated with it. But pipe down, at least in the naval context, would be, there's a specific piercing whistle from the bosun's pipe that would signify the announcement that the ship is sort of going into night mode, right? No one really ever goes fully to sleep because you have to maintain watch 24/7, but we do have a rough day and night on the ship. And after that, announcements are supposed to be minimized. And I would imagine that in the days of sail, that perhaps and when we didn't have radars and whatnot to man, that would be somewhat even more significant. Go put out the lights, get in your hammock, something like that. And that is the naval origin of it. And the bosuns take great pride in being good bosun's pipe downers. And when someone really messes one up in front of the whole ship on the 1MC, it is the cause of I'm sure some ribbing in the bosun's locker.
So I have a question for Daniel. So thank you, Chase. We learned about bosun's pipe and piping. And pipe down means the whole ship goes into sort of lower activity mode.
Yeah, night mode, so to speak.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when the old man shouts at the kids, pipe down, they mean be quiet, stop doing things.
Yeah, that's right. Because when it was bedtime, the bosun would play the tune on the pipe, and the sailors would all go down to bed and be quiet. And so that sense of being quiet from the 1700s carried over into the 1800s, and that's where we start seeing pipe down.
Oh, okay.
That one is Def's nautical. Okay, next one. Cut of their jib, Aristemo asks us. What about this one? Chase, what's a jib?
So the jib is the small, not all ships have them, but in the days of sailing ships, a small forwardmost sail on a sailing ship. And the jib, I have done in the past some small amount of research or, learning on what the sail does. And it actually doesn't do much propelling on its own, but it has something to do with the aerodynamic properties of enabling less or more turbulence on the mainsail, therefore allowing the ship to go faster and with better control.
Okay, so what's this cut thing?
Well, the cut, as I understand it, is not so much the physical cut or the size and the shape, but if you keep it taut, because it's sort of useless if it's flapping around.
Uh-huh.
And so what I would imagine to be the connection is like the cut of your jib, so that the style or perhaps how you manage the jib sail, and that would tell the viewers a lot, or tell anyone looking at it a lot about the ship, what purpose it is, but also how well the crew was handling it, because it's very easy for that jib sail to, if it's not, carefully attended to. And then I think that connects to, I like how you look, or I like how you think.
Or how you're doing things, or how you're operating the ship, okay. I see here a quote from Sir Walter Scott in 1824. I don't know if this is the first mention, but if she disliked what the sailor calls the cut of their jib, and that little sailor reference indicates that at least Sir Walter Scott at the time thought that this was a sailor thing. This was generally agreed to be of a nautical origin. And of course, since it is a part of a boat, then that would make sense. So no disputing there. But thank you for backing us up with some information about that one. Let's see. I want to skip over to one by Aria Flame. Oh, she's already had one, but let's do another one. Grog. So one thing that I know about grog is that it's related to groggy. If you drink too much grog, then you do feel groggy, and I hadn't made that connection before. So that was fun. But what do we have on grog?
Well, so grog in Swedish is the thing that you mix. It's the hard liquor that you mix with something else to make a palatable drink.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
So, like, vodka is a kind of grog, and you can mix that with orange juice or whatever you're doing. And then that other thing is called, you don't have this word, but like, what do you call like wood, firewood? Like wood that you use for fire?
Yeah, firewood, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so orange juice in this scenario is grog firewood.
Is that right?
Because it's what you add to make a thing that's valuable.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Grogvirke, yeah. And like tonic water is also grog firewood.
Okay. Now, Chase, what have you got on this one?
So grog, as I understand it, was originally sort of a Royal Navy, or perhaps going back farther than that term, that was the watered-down rum that the sailors were issued as part of their ration, and possibly connected to the lack of fresh water aboard, and this helped keep the level of infection down. But now, obviously, we're not getting drunk aboard Navy ships anymore. There's no grog ration, has not been for quite a long time. Its modern usage in a naval setting would be generally a particularly nasty drink. In the context, you would see this as a dining out, which is this naval tradition where generally the wardroom, so the officers, go out and everyone gets on their nicest uniform and brings a date. It's very impressive. And there's a lot of fun and funny traditions associated with that. And people get called out for various things they have done wrong. Or perceived to have done wrong, both at the ceremony and on the ship, and they are forced to go drink the grog, which is generally, think about fraternity, animal house style, disgusting. If they just, put mayonnaise and hard liquor and, whatever else.
Witch's brew.
Yeah, absolutely disgusting. You're forced to go drink the grog, and you have to go, drink a cup of it, and it's revolting, having done it on several occasions.
Okay.
Is Navy culture just like very similar to fraternity culture?
In some ways, yes, in the sense that it's a bunch of young men put together, and I think you just get similar group dynamics. In many senses, no, in that there's at least some semblance of order and structure and work to be done, as opposed to, I guess there's theoretically studying to be done or expected in a fraternity, but I think the standards are much looser. But I would say there are some instances, but significantly more professionalized and fewer of the downsides.
I've got a reference here to Old Grog, which was the nickname of someone named Edward Vernon, a British admiral. So this is about 1740. He, in August 1740, ordered his sailors' rum to be diluted, and the reason his nickname was Old Grog was because he wore a grogram cloak. And I'd never heard of grogram, but apparently it's a bit like burlap. It's a coarse fabric. Now, is that going to fit in, or does that run afoul of Hedvig's information that there's a Norse tie-in as well?
No. The Norse, we could just have borrowed it. I am actually looking up the Swedish. So the oldest Swedish example of grog is 1795.
Oh, shoot, that's way after 1740, so that sounds totally plausible.
And it says, manskapet på örlogsfartyg bör och den kalla årstiden alla eftermiddagar få varm grogg tillagad av brännvin, vatten och brunsirap. So that means the crew on the certain kind of ship that I don't know the word for in English, in the cold days, all afternoons, should be served hot grog, which is made from a kind of hard liquor that I don't know the way for in English, water and brown syrup. That sounds like they're trying to make rum because they're adding brown syrup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so he got named after the grogram that he wore, but then the grog got named after him. That's interesting.
Maybe, yeah. But the other thing about alcohol on ships, so in medieval times, because water was often infested with various kinds of bacteria, you could get sick. So like all through medieval times, people would drink light alcohol, even children, because that was safer than water, right? So it makes sense that even sailors would be trying to not get sick. Especially if you have standing water in barrels, you probably got all kinds of shit going on, right?
Yeah. All right, we're going to say that one is nautical. Let's go on to one by Istin has mentioned cockpit as having a nautical origin. Yay or nay?
I don't know. I only associate cockpit with aviation, and there's certainly a lot of naval aviation, but I have, I'm going to plead ignorance here.
Okay.
I know that cockpit is a thing on an airplane, and I think it's a part of a ship as well.
It is. It was applied to ships before it was applied to airplanes, but...
Yeah. I think a lot of things are, right? Like, you get, like, airplane captains and...
Yeah, that's the path, right?
Yeah.
So the reason it's called a cockpit is because it resembled the circular pit that you would induce roosters to fight each other in, which is terribly sad and not something that I like. But it does, in photos, it really does look like a round sort of circular pit. So cockpit is what it is, and then that got applied. So is it nautical? Not originally, but as far as a nautical usage, that certainly predates the aviation usage. So I guess we can say that's a yes. I want to know about Captain's log, because this is one of Ben's favorite things, and he's not here right now. But tell us the story of log from your perspective, Chase, if you wouldn't mind.
So a captain's log would be more properly called today a deck log. And that is a legal document where you write down what is happening on the ship. And there's certain required things and certain, optional things, sort of best practice things you would write down. And as the officer of the deck, sort of the person in charge of the pilot house, right, or the wheelhouse, you have your quartermaster write stuff down. And at the end of every watch, you would sign it, right, to verify its authenticity. And this is a legal document. But ultimately, the captain, the CO, retains ultimate responsibility for everything that happens on the ship. Everything. It's a tradition that the US Navy inherited from the Royal Navy. And that would be the equivalent of a captain's log and, essentially the captain's book. of what is happening on board the ship.
So as to why they call it a log, I have the story here. It's the story that Ben likes. So what they would do when they were sailing about, they would measure the ship's progress by throwing a log overboard, an actual wooden board or a wooden log with a rope attached to it. And then they would watch as the rope would play out, and that's how they would measure the speed, and then they would record that speed in
Knots. Yeah.
That's right. The string had knots in it, and that's why we say that you travel at a rate of knots, and we record things in a logbook. So yes, definitely nautical. Interesting.
So I had been falsely told by somebody a long time ago that was not actually true, and so I was afraid to say it. I was afraid to say it. I didn't want to be proven wrong.
Well, maybe it is wrong. Let's find out. Did they really? How would we find out?
We Google. And then once we've Googled, here's a teaching moment.
Yes.
We look at the things we get, and we Google captain's log etymology on your husband's computer, who has a different keyboard from you, so you misspell it. And then you see that the first entry, because I'm me and my husband is very similar to me as well, is about Star Trek. And you skip that one.
Yes, you do.
And then we have logbook on Wikipedia and logbook on Wiktionary. Wiktionary tends to collate a lot of... They're not always right. And they say the thing about the wooden float thing from the 1670s.
And nobody is gainsaying it. Is it weird that the entry for Wikipedia, there's an entry called chip log, not ship log?
Chip log.
History. All nautical instruments that measure the speed of a ship through water are known as logs. This nomenclature dates back to the days of sail, when sailors tossed a log attached to a rope, knotted at regular intervals off the stern of a ship. Sailors counted the number of knots that passed through their hands in a given time to determine the ship's speed. Today, sailors and aircraft pilots still express speed in knots. Nothing in that entry or any of the others that I've seen have said that that's wrong. And I know that sounds like it's one of those, there used to be an actual log. And it sounds like one of those dumb things. But in this case, it actually appears to be true.
Interesting.
Well, what I'm worried about is that it's a very attractive story.
Yes. And if it's attractive, then you got to worry about it.
And sometimes that means it spreads to wildfire through several sources. Because everyone's like, that's fun and quirky. People think we're really boring. Let's add a fun and quirky thing so that people think we're fun.
On the other hand, we do know that this is a fairly well-documented thing. And people have described... Let's just see if in the Oxford English Dictionary, is there a record of people saying we threw the log overboard and counted the number of knots and blah, blah, blah.
I checked Etym online.
That's good.
Urban Dictionary is being very silly, as per usual.
Oh.
They're saying that it has to do with Captain Kirk's feces.
Why wouldn't it be?
Of course. But it's interesting because the log book of, has been completely disassociated from, in many contexts from anything nautical, right? You've left off the deck part or the captain's part, and now anyone could conceivably have a log book in which you're just recording the events of the day or the shift or, whatever thing is going on, Boy Scout troop logbook or something.
Well, here's a description from 1574. I'm just going to read some of these quotes from Oxford. 1574, they hail, I guess that means haul, they hail in the log or piece of wood again, and look how many fathom the ship hath gone in that time. 1644, somebody out of the gallery lets fall the log. 1669, we throw the log every 2 hours. And then 1719, heave the log from the poop, which brings in our Captain Kirk metaphor there.
Okay, I have a question for you two.
Okay.
Do you think that log in this... So log is also used in programming when you write a script and you get output. While you're waiting for that output, you might make the script report to a log. So what that means is it'll do its output and do its thing, but it'll also be it'll write in this little text document, I did this thing. The time is this. And then when it finishes another task, it's and I did this thing and the time is that. And then you can look at the log because you don't want to sit and babysit your script all the time. You can look at what it did at what time, which is good if you want to try and make it more efficient in certain ways. That's called a log, not a logbook or anything. That's just called a log. Another thing in programming that's called a log is when you log transform a number.
But
Is
that's from
logarithmic?
logarithm.
Yeah.
Or,
This is where I was going to see if you guys would be confused, but you weren't.
And we both weren't. Woo. Both of us.
Good job.
Don't forget also that on computers you log in and log out, so that comes from log as well.
yeah, and presumably that gets logged somewhere.
Also, don't forget blog, which comes from weblog. So there's a log again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you learn programming today and you learn like, oh, you're typing to a log and here's a log transform of this number, you could see how someone could be like, oh, are those related? What's going on?
Oh no, ambiguity, once again.
Yeah.
This one's from Glyph. Keelhaul.
Ah.
This sounds really terrible. Did it really happen? Did people really get keelhauled?
So
Oh,
I do know that people, in fact, were keelhauled.
I think they were.
And it goes back to, I believe, Roman times, where it was a prescribed punishment. And you know, there's sort of two ways this is described, as I understand it. One is where there's sort of ropes tied to the person's hands and the feet, and they're sort of dragged on the underside of the ship, and these ships have a bunch of barnacles on them, and this person, you know, if they're continuously dragged along their back, they're most likely dead or permanently crippled by the time they get to the other side, and it would be a near-death sentence for someone who had committed some particularly egregious act, which back in the days of really pre-modern sail could be something as little as talking back to an officer or falling asleep on your watch could quite literally be the death sentence back then. But the more modern, quote-unquote, version was practiced by the Dutch. I think it has a Dutch origin, where they would tie your feet or your arms to one of the masts, and then they would, sort of sink you, with, lead on your feet, and then they would like pull you, and then that would be cut, and then you'd be pulled, and so you wouldn't be scraped along all the barnacles, but nonetheless it would be a cold and painful and, humiliating punishment. And it was considered particularly barbaric, and I don't believe that it ever happened with the Royal or US Navy, but, who knows what happens at sea sometimes, I think, would not be unheard of.
Yeah, I was going to say probably some point, right? People do crazy stuff.
I need to go back a step. What part of the boat is the keel?
Oh.
Is it like on the bottom?
The keel is the bottom.
Okay.
Right.
So you get hauled under the keel, and then that's how you get keel hauled, allegedly, in the story.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a sailing ship, right? Like if you have a small sailing ship and you're doing racing, then usually you have like kind of a small boat, and then you have like a long keel. Because the deeper your keel is, the more stable you are, right?
Yeah, and so a lot of sailboats will have sort of a deep protrusion fin, effectively, for additional stabilization. And there's a lot of maritime engineering that goes into that. But the keel is technically, it's just the sort of the backbone, the very bottom part in the middle, the backbone. But you could broadly, sort of a more expansive, people know what you're talking about, definition be sort of anything on the bottom portion of the boat, below the waterline generally.
Okay.
And it is what will hit ground if anything hits ground.
Correct. And that would, leave you high and dry if the tide went out. And
Yeah.
High and dry. There you go. Let's move on to Laura's question about booty, because I found something interesting about that one. But do we have any idea why booty is called booty? Or is this one me?
Educate us.
Should I drive?
Yeah.
Is it
Okay.
to shoes somehow?
Unrelated. Not related to shoes.
Mm.
So this ties into a question. Sometimes people ask me, why is it good, better, and best? Why isn't it good, gooder, and goodest? And
Why is anything?
why is anything?
Why is anything? Uh-huh.
But in this case, there's an interesting answer.
Okay.
Good is a word that supplanted an older word that did have a B in it. The word was bot. Bot,
Okay.
Botter, and best. Bot, better, and best. And then eventually good sort of took over because people liked it, but the better and best remained. The word bot meant some sort of advantage or something good. And so if you managed to get your hands on some booty, that was something good. That gave you an advantage or gave you something, it was good for you to have that. So now the word bot survives in exactly two places that I know of, and that's booty, which is something good, or to boot, It's delicious and nutritious to boot, and that means in addition to, as another additional good thing. So booty and to boot, but they are not related to boots that you wear on your feet, and that's why we call it booty.
Booty always has somewhat of a unsavory or seedy or piratical, perhaps, connotation. Is it, or do you guys have a different one? Is that just me?
Booty.
You know, like
it's pirates, right? So
right.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking, well, I mean, it is kind of unsavory, but I mean, pirates, right? So
anything that you get, like, you might call booty, I don't know, but like maybe if you're doing not on sea, but you're doing some kind of like capturing of something good. Like if you're an army and you're trying to, or if you're like playing a video game and you're trying to like capture the flag, maybe you could call that booty. But I feel like you need to get it through violence.
Yeah, it's nefarious, definitely.
Yeah, or I guess ultimately it derives from violence, but I would say, you know, pirate's booty, right? You know, it's buried treasure, effectively.
Yeah. Okay, here's where I get to say why I went hoo earlier when Daniel was saying about boot, botter, and bottest or best.
Oh, yes.
So, Scandinavian languages, we have boot, which means nowadays, which means improvement, and it means like a cure.
Oh my goodness.
Like if you got poison, then what you need is a botemedel, like a bettering agent.
Amazing.
But it doesn't mean just good anymore, but it means cure.
Yes,
But
okay.
it looks like it's the same thing. I'm looking up on an etymology.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad there's a Scandi reflex. That's really rad.
Well, I mean, this is going to happen all the time, right?
Yeah. Here's another one that Laura said was maybe has a Scandi reflex, and that's landlubber. Hedvig, does that twig anything for you?
We would say something else, right?
Because I've got here, there's a Swedish dialectical word, whatever that means.
Okay.
Lubber, a plump, lazy fellow. Heard of that one?
Sorry, what?
Some sort of lazy lout?
I've heard of lubber as in like a person, you know, sort of a generic, like perhaps Scandinavian old-fashioned term for person.
A plump, lazy fellow. That's what my sources are giving me.
How are you spelling it?
Lubber.
L-U-B-B. That's you.
Yes.
That's not an L sound. That's a Y sound. But fine.
Oh. So that's a thing.
L-U-B-B-A-R.
E-R. Is that, or is there a lobi, L-O-B-I, which is a lazy...
What I'm confused about is that there's the word job. Can you spell it in the Zoom chat? I'm confused about the words. I'm very bad with spelling. I'm a very bad linguist. When people tell me letters, my brain cannot make them into words.
Totally
spell
understand.
it in the Zoom chat.
Totally understand. Here I go.
L-U-B-B.
There's my reference there in chat.
Lubber. Okay, there's no J there.
Nope.
Thought you said a J. See? This is why you can't trust me when you say letters. Okay,
No
now
problem.
I have to... Well, there's the only one I know, which the thing says here, which is lupa, which means to run.
Probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm willing to cast some doubt on my etymology there. I would just like to say, however, that the existence of landlubbers supposes the existence of other kind of lubbers, for example, air lubbers, fire lubbers, and of course water lubbers, which are sort of presumed.
Before the Fire Nation attacked, yeah.
Have you heard of any other sort of lubber in usage?
It's not like monger, is it? I mean, we should have all kinds of mongers floating around, but it's always something bad, like scandalmonger, whoremonger, rumormonger, and fish.
Fish, yeah.
I was going to say, so lub can be a kind of fish, and it can be a word for, it's connected with running. Like,
How
to run in various ways.
I wonder if that has the same root.
I don't know what this thing is. Plump, lazy fella.
Not sure.
Oh, it
Okay.
can be a clumsy object.
What? Well, that's what I want. Well, so what is that one?
Well, it just says clumsy object from 1755.
That sounds like a relevant sense.
Yeah, but it's a very, 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 very small entry.
And it's very late as well, 1700s.
Yeah.
Because we start seeing lubber from the 1300s, which is really early.
Maybe it's landlubber as someone who runs around on land. That makes way more sense to me.
Oh.
That makes sense.
Hey, if we're
That's because
yeah,
it's not a crazy lazy person. It's a person who runs around. Oh, maybe they're crazy and lazy.
Yeah.
Is this where I get to say that Viking was a job?
I did not know that you could be like that was your occupation.
No, the idea that all Scandi people during like 800 to like 1200 were Vikings is not true. Viking was a small part of the population who had the job of going seafaring and terrorizing other people and try to get things from them. They were Vikings.
but primarily trading.
The majority of the population were farmers.
But primarily trading, though, right? Because most of them, they went down a lot of the Danube and a bunch of other Central European rivers, and there's, tons of, Vikings, essentially, who were trading with the Byzantine Empire.
Oh, yeah, and they were, like, part of the Byzantine Guard and things like that, but they also
raiding
raped
England.
and pillaged. Yeah, like, it's very much, like, two sides of the same, like, they were doing both things all the time, probably. When they could rape and pillage, they did.
Yeah.
I think.
Whatever's easiest.
And sometimes they didn't. Like, I know that there are records of Vikings, like Scandi people, coming to England and then just sort of coexisting. In fact, sometimes taking land that was worse if other land was already taken. So,
Well, England was just this extraordinarily rich land, especially compared to, Scandinavia, probably. And, a bunch of before England was unified, you had a bunch of independent kingdoms, essentially. And, the Vikings essentially just arrived and they, over the course of a generation, conquered a bunch of it and got themselves, and then once you have this area, it's like, well, why do we have to keep raiding? We could just stick around and become king of this great area. And then they sort of became part of the aristocracy, and either intermarried or came to some accommodation with the existing or not with the existing English aristocratic and power structures. And now we have a Anglo-Saxon, Norman-inflected England.
I mean, that was part of it. And like whenever they do like genetic survey of England, they find like Scandinavian DNA. You can see in certain words. You can see it particularly in Scottish, like the word for child is bairn, which is barn in Scandi languages. Like you can see it clearly. They still raped and pillaged and killed people.
Oh, yeah.
And I should say that like in medieval times also, sure, everyone kind of did that. That's like just the nature of ruling a society and having power involves massive killing and otherizing other people. I was watching this video recently about like whether we should construe that as like racism or not, because like all through ancient times and pre-modern times, like Greeks, for example, hated everyone who wasn't Greek, regardless of their skin color.
Right. I think that, anything other than extreme cultural chauvinism is a, something that is 1 or 2 or 3 decades old. I think every culture throughout world history has been like, we are the greatest, the gods love us, and you all suck. And therefore we can do whatever we want.
There are a couple of cases of like semi-multicultural empires, like the Songhai Empire, arguably, and the Persian Empire, and a couple of more, or the Mongols, who were like, yeah, you can practice whatever religion you want as long as you pray for our emperor.
But do you think that the ruling, ethno group, thought that, oh yeah, you guys are as good as us, or it's just like, yeah, we're going to tolerate you?
Yeah, exactly. It's more like tolerate, and like Vikings went very far. They did trade. They did do semi-peaceful trade maybe in some cases, but also they definitely raped and pillaged and killed and everywhere. And I mean, everyone did, but they were also exceptionally good at it, as we know, because they were like hired to do it for other people.
Par for the course for a militarily successful society.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the reason, if we get back to naval stuff, part of the reason they were able to do it is because the shipbuilding was pretty good. Yeah. They had these like wide keels and
shallow draft and could go up rivers and were the closest thing that the I guess medieval world had to shock and awe, where they could deliver a boatload or two of men to a village or a monastery or a town or something like that, and you can't muster a response in that amount of time. And the rivers were highways for both trading, but also for raping and pillaging. And, conveniently all the towns were located on rivers.
I was listening to the facilitation about the Songhai Empire, and they were also, there was a period where they were really going on boats on rivers a lot. And there was a particular ruler for a while who was so fond of it that when they were sieging towns, before they sieged a town, they would dig a canal to the town. Because he was like, no, all the people have to arrive by boat. And if there isn't a waterway to where we're going, we're going to make one. They would just like dig canals, put their boats on it. And I just think that's...
Was that like a love, or the fact that, it was logistically impossible to transport enough food without it?
Maybe, but like no other emperors in the region or rulers in the region or emperors before and after this guy really did it. So,
just like boats. I like boats.
I like boats.
Interesting.
Let's go with boats. Yeah.
Okay, you two can see the run sheet just as well as I can. Are there any
I can't because I'm
expressions
on my husband's computer.
Are there any expressions that you would like to tackle? We can bounce around a little bit. Let's get the ones that you're especially fascinated by.
Yeah, so one thing that old Anne said, and I'm curious if you guys have an opinion on this, and she said, I just read a reference to an old seafaring journal that used the phrase, our ship got underway, and that's UNDER space WEIGH, for a ship leaving port. Interesting spelling, and apparently the expression underway is a nautical one. And so underway, WAY, is the ship leaving port. And my thought with under WEIGH is that it's sort of a pre-modern bad spelling, prior to dictionaries and whatnot and spell check. Do you guys think it could be anything else?
It does appear to be an eggcorn, as far as I can tell. So here's the story that I have here, as far as I could put together, was that way, W-A-Y, doesn't mean a road or a route, but it is nautical. It means the progress of the ship through the water, or the wake that the ship leaves behind. And way has been used like that since at least the 1600s. But I took a look at underway, W-A-Y, versus underway. Looks like underway has been used since 1622, underway with the GH, only since 1777. So it looks like the underway, W-A-Y, is the earliest spelling. And, interestingly, comes from Dutch onderweg, which means under or among the ways. So this is a very early meaning of under, where we think of under being like, oh, you're under a thing, it's on top of you. But under used to mean something like among, and that is the same sense of under as understand. As far as we can tell, when you understand something, it's because you are standing not under the things that you understand, but you are standing among the things that you are able to comprehend. So this is a fascinating, super old version of under that they used for understand and also underway. So there's the tie-in.
Interesting.
Also, isn't way with the G and way just cognates?
That I don't know.
All the other Germanics, we do G at the end.
That's true. Okay, so now we have... It's time for the related or not game. Is way and way related? Let's just find out.
W-A-Y and W-E-I-G-H.
Do you guys want to pre-register some guesses?
I think they are related.
I think they are related because I already know that it's under veg with a G. So why not? But what's the unifying sense? I'm having trouble.
Road, way.
And then the sense of weighing something, gauging its weight. What's going on there?
It's just different.
Thank you, Hedvig.
Sorry. I don't think that weighing something and this kind of way is related.
You don't?
I don't. Also, before like 1900, spelling is just a free-for-all.
I know. But if it is written, then it probably ties in somehow. Let's see. From etymonline.com, they mention that there's way, that W-E-I-G-H, like something weighs a lot, comes from Old High German Wägen, to move or to carry or to weigh, and to move or transport in a vehicle.
Yeah, so they could be related.
I think they are related. They both go back to Proto-Indo-European weg. And the unifying sense here is that you're lifting something, which shows how much it weighs, but when you lift it, you move it onto a vehicle so that you can then move it. And this ties into another sense, which is to weigh anchor, which doesn't mean to see how heavy the anchor is. It means to lift the anchor. So when you weigh something, you've got to lift it so that you can see how much it weighs. And that implies moving, and that implies taking it on some sort of way with you.
Interesting.
So yes.
There you go.
Related, and I had not known that before. Okay, that was pretty cool. What's another one that seems... We can move off of our patron list onto our grab bag if you want to. Were there any that captivated your attention?
So, I knew many of them, or I at least heard them and sort of suspected a nautical origin. But do you guys not know the origin of the slush fund?
I had not. I think I want you to tell me this story because I'm still sort of vague.
Yeah.
I didn't research this one in depth.
So a slush fund, so there's a ship, right? It goes out to sea, and they have this horrible, hard, salted meat, basically proto-beef jerky, I guess.
Yeah,
right.
You gotta have it.
You gotta have some protein.
Off.
I mean, yeah, they kept pigs and chickens, but after you ran out. And the cook aboard the ship would boil this disgusting salted meat, right, to soften it up and so people didn't break their rotting molars. And on top of this boiling cauldron of salted hard meat, the fat would separate and form this layer of scum, and the cook would ladle off and put it in a bucket or a barrel or something. And so now you have this barrel of fat. And yeah, there's shipboard uses for this. You can use it to waterproof ropes and other things aboard a ship, but you don't need this much. And so the ship's cook got to sell this off, for other commercial uses when the ship came in. Here's a barrel of fat, and got to keep the proceeds as part of the benefits of being a ship's cook, and that was his, and he could spend it on what he wanted. And that was the slush fund.
Yeah, okay.
And the slush?
I'm sorry. And the slush was that fatty, scum layer that developed on top of the boiling cauldron of salted meat that nobody apparently felt hungry enough to eat.
But very useful.
So slushing around.
It would definitely be slushy.
Yeah.
No, but there's always a tampon slushing around in my purse.
Yeah. Oh, I think a more likely word to be sloshing.
Yeah, like slushing around. So slush, I think of it more, sort of that semi-frozen, the snow is gotten dirty and started to melt. And it's this, wet.
That was the other one I was going to
slush.
say.
And that is, I think, part of the, of a similar consistency to salty fat layer on top of the cook's
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
cauldron.
that somebody was slushing unless they were moving through slush. Then I guess I could say that they were slushing. I would definitely say that they were sloshing around. I've never heard anybody say that they were slushing around. I know those two words seem really similar, but I haven't heard them interchanged like that.
But what about the tampon in my purse? What would you say about
That's
that one?
sloshing around.
Sloshing.
No.
Okay.
I'd say it's sloshing around.
Okay, finally English cares about vowels.
I know it never does before. Why start now?
But regardless, thank you, Chase. So slush fund, regardless of the origins of slush fund is a little bit of extra money that the ship's cook could spend on whatever they wanted, and it's later
from selling
been
the
used
slush, and then
yeah.
becomes associated with some generally I would say corrupt connotations today.
Right, because
Yeah,
I was
definitely.
listening to because it's the World Cup going on right now, the men's World Cup where nations compete in football, also called soccer. And I've been listening to a podcast
heard
about
that.
corruption in FIFA,
Yeah.
and they
What?
talk a lot about slush money.
Say it ain't so. How on earth could tell me that there was no corruption involved in a tiny Middle Eastern country, with no history or infrastructure getting the World Cup? What?
Don't
Yeah.
have heroes, kids.
And with a bunch of Swiss businessmen, because Swiss businessmen are famous for doing everything fully transparently.
Yes.
What the hell happened there?
Yeah,
All the forms
no,
will
it's
be
a surprise to
filed with
everyone
the relevant
involved.
tax authorities. Have no fear.
But they talk a lot about slush money,
Okay.
right? And the term they use in Swiss German, I think I just remembered. I don't know this exact term, but it's like smörjmedel. It's like similar to the Swedish one, which means like greasing agent.
Oh, and we talk about greasing people's palms, right?
Yeah.
Ah.
Which they're probably unrelated because of this fat stuff, but it's like Yeah, you grease the wheels.
Definitely convergent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was interested in skyscraper.
Yeah, so I personally had no idea that was a nautical origin, but if you think about it, a sailing ship was pretty much the tallest thing around. I mean, maybe there was a church or a cathedral that was taller, but the mast would be quite literally scraping the sky, and that would be the tallest thing that probably the average person ever saw or went on top of, unless they were from a particularly big city. And so, skyscraper, right?
Yep, exactly. Turns out a skyscraper has also meant different things, like a very tall hat or bonnet, a very tall person, he's a real skyscraper, a very tall horse, or a very tall tail. And finally it's settled on, I think the dominant meaning now is a very tall building, but the tallest sail appears from 1791. One more. Hedvig, you've got the list now. Anything
I do.
you see that takes your fancy?
Well, since I'm on a show here with Americans, there's a lot of American politics now in the news, maybe we should do filibuster.
Okay, that was a fun one. That's also in my sneakily nautical list.
Right. So,
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously a filibuster, a means of obstructing legislation with a minority party, but what is the nautical origin of that? Because that is actually, I think, one of the ones I found the most surprising.
I would have said that this was the name of a senator who engaged in the tactic of filibustering, but
like
it's
gerrymandering.
really... Exactly. It sounds like it, but it's not. It was a vliebouter, a pirate, probably from Dutch vrijbuiter, a freebooter. And the reason you're a freebooter is because you take the booty for free.
Okay.
The booty, yeah.
The booty. We're back to booty again. We haven't even talked about the other sense of booty, but that's for a different show. So if you are a senator and you want to shut down debate on a topic and just obstruct, it's because you're pirating people's time or you're overthrowing the way that things normally go.
But how do you get from free to Philly?
Well, R and L are both approximants.
Oh my god. And then you flip them around.
Yes, metathesis is a very common process.
And add another vowel.
And buster, add from booter to buster. It probably went through a lot of different languages because this shows up in a lot of places. But yeah, the sounds bounce around a lot. So we got vrijbuiter and then finds its way into filibuster.
So is it safe to say that the metaphor in English for what you do in the politics is that you're pirating other people's time?
Yes. I believe that is the intended sense.
And there are certainly, whoever is currently in the majority would say that you are pirating the people's will as well. Although, of course, whose will you are pirating depends on who is in power, of course.
Right. So, but the other languages that have something like freebooter, etc., that just means a kind of pirate. And then that word for pirate in English happened to verge off to sucking other people's time and energy, like a emotional vampire or something.
a senatorial pirate.
Right.
Oh, okay. I really thought it was like Latin.
I think that if you're going to filibuster and you're a senator, you have to do two things. Number one, you have to actually talk. You have to actually talk, not just threaten to filibuster. And then number two, you have to wear the hat.
And an eye patch.
Yep. And an eye patch.
And you have to vaguely talk on topic as well, right?
Well, not anymore,
so.
Because now you just have to threaten a filibuster, and that's enough to make it happen.
But you can't be like, today I had a cup of coffee and...
Oh no, you most certainly can.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Gumbo recipes have been read from the Senate floor as part of a filibuster.
Phone books, the Constitution again and again and again and again and again, and how many times we need to hear the income tax amendment or something like that.
Yep. I do not yield my time. Let's just finish up. We got a few minutes left. Let's just talk about the expressions that everyone thinks are nautical, but just simply are not.
Okay.
And I'm thinking of cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey.
First time I ever heard that.
What's this? It's cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. What's the story here, Chase? What have you heard? Have you heard this?
So I have heard this phrase, but I have not heard it enough to actually ascribe a meaning to it beyond, a laugh. So, doing a little bit of research before the show, right? I because I was curious, and I spoke my curiosity. has something to do with cannonballs?
So the story is that they would arrange cannonballs in a pyramid on a tray aboard the ship, and the tray was called a brass monkey. And supposedly, when it would get cold, the tray would contract and the cannonballs would spill out. Nothing like that was ever used to store cannonballs. Just did not happen.
So was monkey from like the powder monkey or what?
Was powder monkey?
Oh, the powder monkey. So that was in the Age of Sail, right? So they have the gun decks, right, where the cannons are, and they kept the gunpowder far away from there, so there's not chain explosions and you don't lose the ship, and that's kept in a very isolated, packed away, sort of surrounded by sand room.
Yeah,
and it was only brought out in small increments. And they had these young boys, often 10, 11, 12 years old. They would be the powder monkeys, and they would go get in small increments gunpowder and bring it to the individual gun crews. So they then could a couple rounds worth or however many, and those are the powder monkeys.
So they're similar to like ball boys in cricket and baseball.
Right, exactly.
Or
tennis,
yeah. There may have also been a cannon called a brass monkey, just to bring that in. But no, the original expression from the 1840s was cold enough to freeze the nose off a brass monkey. By the 1850s, we see freeze the tail off a brass monkey. 1880s, we see the ears off a brass monkey. In 1920s, we see the whiskers off a brass monkey, finally settling in the 1960s on cold enough to freeze the balls off of a brass monkey. Michael Quinion of Worldwide Words thinks that it's about the three wise monkeys who, they cover their eyes, they cover their ears.
Okay. And there were brass figurines of these monkeys around.
That's right. And
Europe, and people were like, oh, if it's cold enough that one of their parts fall off, then it must be really cold.
That's the thing. And sometimes you do see 4 brass monkeys instead of just the 3, and you can guess what the 4th monkey is covering up.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have 2 cats that are running around. And I see that we have let the cat out of the bag on this list. And I'm going to see if I can... Well, they're chasing each other. Do you want to come and say hi? Oh, your tail is all bushy because you're all excited because you're being chased. Here is Sandy. And he
Sandy.
loves being in bags.
Okay.
If I have a cloth bag and I open it, he will just go inside.
Goodness gracious.
I have this on video. He loves being in bags. He loves bags much more than boxes. So what's the story with let the cat out of the bag, please?
So letting the cat out of the bag, right? Letting the secret go. And I believe that it comes from the cat o' nine tails, which was the traditional 9-tailed, filleting whip that would be used to lash the sailors, for, what we would today consider relatively trivial misdemeanors, but punishment used to be harsh aboard Royal Navy vessels, probably other navies as well. And it was kept in a bag, right? And
was it though? Was it really?
Perhaps it was kept at the bosun's waist, depending on the nature of the ship. And the phrase comes from there. A sailor who had done whatever was wrong would let the cat out of the bag, and out comes the cat of nine tails, and people would be lashed mercilessly. And that was not eliminated until the years escaped me, but shockingly late. The lash was still liberally applied in the Royal Navy, and in fact, it was never. I don't want to say never, but it was nowhere near as extensively done in the United States naval tradition, and conditions were generally better aboard U.S. Navy ships, which is a contributing factor towards a lot of British sailors trying to get aboard said British ships, causing shortfalls of manpower during the Napoleonic War, and thus the British trying to steal them back and instigating the War of 1812.
So that's the story. Now, I was looking for instances of let the cat out of the bag, and it seems like, and this is one of the things, if you see it and it's talking about ships, then that's cool. But if it's not talking about ships, then you kind of go, And the earliest instances that we have nothing to do with punishment. They are seriously talking about letting a literal cat out of a literal bag, which means that some bad thing is going to happen. Some kind of incident is going to happen because you got an angry cat that's hissing and spitting. And so this one doesn't seem to have anything to do with the cat of nine tails. That would be a fanciful naval ascription. The other one is enough room to swing a cat, which, you got to ask, are we talking about a room that's big enough to grab an actual cat by the tail and swing it around, or are we talking about swinging a cat of nine tails? seems that the Cat o' Nine Tails has only been attested in print from 1695, whereas the Enough Room to Swing a Cat is quite a bit earlier, 1665. 30 years may not be enough to really establish that, but it looks like the swinging a cat expression, as in a literal cat, comes before the Cat of Nine Tails, and I think that is a fanciful ascription as well. What do you think? Does that sound about right?
Sounds fine to me.
Please do not ever do any of these things. Don't swing a
Not
cat around.
cats,
Don't
of course.
trap a cat. Well, if you need to take him to the vet, we needed to take our cat to the vet. We needed to trap him, but generally don't.
Don't lash people either,
I have to say that Daniel's use of quite a bit earlier, and it was 30 years.
I know. You're quite right. You're right.
I am older than 30.
I did say, didn't I? I said that's pretty tight, but
It's pretty
as far
tight.
as we know,
So I have one more. It's not on the run sheet, and I heard this fake naval origin of a phrase, and I saw it at a nautical museum, and I couldn't remember which one. So I called around to a bunch of nautical museums, and they still have it up, and I told them they are wrong, and so that they could take it down, right?
Sure.
I've gone to a lot of them, and it is.
I'll totally do that.
And it is son of a gun. So have you guys heard that, and could you guess a naval origin? A fake naval origin, mind you.
I did research this one. Hedvig, what do you think?
I have no idea, but I'm going to guess that it's like the person manning the cannon? Or yeah.
Okay, so I've heard two stories, but which one do you want to talk about, Chase?
I want to hear your guess, and then I'll tell you what I saw at the museum, and then which is quite just go ahead.
Well, I was going to say a hired gun is a sailor, and then they would say that a sailor who has sailors go around to lots of places, and so they would have lots of children who were conceived out of wedlock, and if you were such a person, then you could be considered a son of a gun, that is to say a hired gun, or somebody who operates guns on a ship, something like that.
So that's close to what was in this museum, and it was purportedly ascribed to a the lowest of the low, meaning the Royal Navy ship, it goes to a port in some foreign land, and they don't let their enlisted sailors off because they're all probably dragooned there and not there willingly, and they wouldn't come back, and so the officers go off, and meanwhile the enlisted sailors are kept aboard, and the local prostitutes seeking spying a business opportunity, row out or get transported out, and on the gun deck, which is sort of one deck below the deck exposed to the weather, right? They would erect sheets effectively, and to create a seedy motel of sorts. And these prostitutes would cavort with the enlisted sailors who could not go ashore because they would not come back. And if you were the son of a gun, you were the child of a prostitute that visited the enlisted sailors, and therefore the lowest of the lowest of the low, and a son of a gun.
That's a great story.
And you saying that's not correct?
It is not.
The other story that's also incorrect is that pregnant women who happened to find themselves aboard naval vessels would give birth in the space between the guns so that you could keep the decks clear. You could clear the decks. And also equally spurious. Fun story, but maybe a little too fun. So what's the real story, Chase?
The real story is just a phrase that came up, and a minced phrase essentially, and much less colorful, but solidly no naval origin, and there was not any until well over 100 years after the phrase first came about, and then there were some folk etymologies, I guess, that tried to ascribe a fun naval origin. So I was very disappointed.
Yep.
But the one that Daniel said first sounds like it could still be true, because hired guns it's not just a naval phenomena, right? A hired gun is any hired mercenary, regardless if they're on water or not.
Possibly, but once again, I guess that the key here is you look at the first instance. Does it have anything to do with those things, or does it have any sort of quotes like, as the military men say, a son of a gun? And we just don't see that. We only see people making up these stories 100 years after the phrase comes up. And I think the most likely answer is, you don't want to call somebody a son of a bitch. So we like rhymes. We like things that rhyme. If it rhymes, it must be true. Drunk as a skunk, even though skunks don't have any observable tendency toward inebriation. Loose as a goose. I guess geese are kind of loose. Snug as a bug in a rug. right? We just love those expressions, and son of a gun is one of those. You say it and everyone knows what you mean.
So it's for son of a bitch.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Okay. All right.
So, what have we learned? We have learned the danger of attractive etymologies.
Mm.
We have learned the origins of several actually naval phrases, that many of which I did not suspect.
Yeah, I learned that lots of expressions that we use are sneakily nautical, and we didn't get to this one, but I want to do it. Ahead. Saying that something is ahead, that's because it's at the head of the ship. It's not astern, it's ahead, it's at the front, and that is originally nautical. Fascinating stuff. There's a lot of these. But I think that maybe, because we only scratched the surface, not a nautical expression, I think we need to come back and do some more one of these days. Chase, what do you say?
I am certainly down for that. I would not want to leave you high and dry, or and you could consider this just a shot across the bow of future nautical collaborations. And if you truly felt the need, you could press gang me into another one if I'm not giving you too wide a berth. Yeah. And then we could chew the fat again together.
Oh, God. They were doing this, listeners. They were doing this before we started recording as well. I apologize.
Oh, my gosh. Well, that's all right. We're keeping ourselves aloof from all of these metaphors.
Oh, my God. Chase, are you also a father?
No,
this is
I
a
am
dad
not.
thing? Okay.
I'm preemptively, developing a repertoire of dad jokes and whatnot.
All right. Well, you're Americans and it is the Thanksgiving season, so I guess that's sort of the cultural part of it, that you have to make dad jokes. Anyway, thank you very much for being on the show, Chase. I think we're wrapping up.
I feel like it. We'd like to say big thanks to our guest for this episode, Chase Dalton from the US Naval History Podcast. Chase, how can people find your show or you?
So they can find me or the show primarily go on any podcasting platform. US Naval History Podcast got a big picture of battleship shooting, and both Twitter and Instagram at US Navy Podcast. And to anyone listening on my feed, if you have enjoyed this, I have immensely enjoyed listening to episodes of Because Language, and I have, A, learned a lot, and B, been thoroughly entertained. So by all means, go over there and subscribe to their feed as well, please.
Fantastic. Thanks also to everybody who gave us ideas for the show. Thanks to Dustin of Sandman Stories, who recommends us to everyone. Thanks to the team at Speech Docs, who transcribes this episode and every other, and most of all, our patrons who give us so much support, make it possible to keep the show going. If you like the show, there are different things that you can do to help us along. You can send us ideas and feedback like all of the lovely people who sent us ideas and feedback for this show. There are lots of ways to do that. You can follow us on the socials. We're Because Lang Pod everywhere, except Spotify. Remember when everyone was dumping Spotify? That was fun. Lasted about 4 months. You can leave us a message with SpeakPipe. That's on our website, becauselanguage.com. You can send us an email, hello@becauselanguage.com. Or you can tell a friend about us, or even leave us a review in all the places where you can leave reviews. There are many such places. Hedvig, your current favorite?
The Podchaser.
Podchaser?
Podchaser.
That's the one.
Yeah. It's not iTunes.
It's not iTunes, it's not Apple, it's not Google, it's something else.
So if you're not using like iTunes to listen to podcasts and you want to review, you can review most podcast apps, including Podcast Addict and Pocket Cast, and all of them have their own review systems.
We love them all.
Podcast is this interesting space, right? Like Chase, it's just an RSS feed. Mm-hmm. And it's this like highly distributed thing. But Podchaser is the place where a lot of people leave reviews that isn't iTunes. So I'd recommend Podchaser.
But a big thing that people can do, and I have seen drive, spikes in traffic, is someone can go on Reddit and find the appropriate subreddit or something like that, or, whatever their social media platform of choices, and be like, I really enjoyed this. I learned, this, and, sort of a personalized review to people that are in their community. And, that's, it's always a nice warm and fuzzy when someone appreciates you.
And those reviews are often very good because they're specific. It's like, I know this forum community and I know this, and this podcast is good because of these reasons, instead of like, I really like this podcast.
Yep.
That's, very broad. And if you're listening to this episode when it comes out, it means that you are a supporter on Patreon. We are very grateful for that. And you enable us to do things like make these bonus episodes. We also maintain a Discord channel where you can hang out with us, and you make it possible for us to make transcripts so that we can search our podcast feed from the back. We're like, when was they talking about the balls of brass monkeys? You can find that now. And
how many episodes?
Yeah. And I'm going to give a special shout out to our top patrons. Okay, I don't think I'm going to do it in one breath. I'm not even going to try. It used to be possible to do it in one breath. It is no longer. I would argue.
You could popcorn over to me if you would like. I don't know. Is that not a school thing?
What
popcorn
word did you say?
Popcorn.
Oh,
new idiom.
Oh my goodness. So
is that nautical?
No. This is just in school when you're reading a text out loud for any class. You would read a sentence or two, and then you would say popcorn Chase or popcorn Anne, and the next person. Everyone has to be following along because in the book because you have to seamlessly take over, and if you didn't, then you got sort of
Oh.
you broke the game.
Let's try it.
Okay, let's try it. Okay.
Go ahead. Have you start.
Okay, I'm gonna start. Istin, Termi, Elias, Matt, Whitney, Helen, Udo, Jack, Popcorn, Chase.
Pharaoh Cat, Lord Morris, Grammar Yen, Larry, Christopher, Andy, James, Nigel, Meredith, Kate, Nazarene, Aisha, Mo, Steele, Manu, Roger, Rianne, Colin, Ignacio, Sonic, Snedgehog?
Yes.
Popcorn Daniel.
Kevin, Jeff, Andy from Logophilius, Stan, Kathy, Rosh, Popcorn, Hedvig.
Cheyenne, Felicity S, Amir, Kenny Archer, O Tim, Alyssa, Chris W, and Felicity G, and our lovely Kate B, who over 1 year ago now pressed the one-time donation button on our website and gave us a hefty sum of money, and we are very grateful for that. Still, we will continue thanking her for a long time to come. And we would want to give a special shout out to our newest patrons. At the listener level, we have Brian Q, Thu, and AJ, and also Justine and Eleanor, who just bumped up to the listener level. Thanks to all of our amazing patrons.
And finally, the theme music for this podcast was written and performed by Drew Krapelianov, who's a member of Ryan Benno and of Digian's Bible. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Because language.
Language.
No, sorry. You're doing great.
Oh, man.
You're doing great.
Okay. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Because language. There we go.
Yay! Thanks, Chase.
Good job.
You're a great co-host. I really like your
you did
show,
very well.
and even though it's like totally out of my wheelhouse.
Oh my god.
Hang on, I'm just sending the run sheet to Hedvig.
The reason Daniel is doing this, Chase, is because he thinks that I'm not sticking to it.
No, that's not why. It's so that you can read the reads.
Oh, okay.